What's the most mind-blowing science fact not many people know about? Story 1, you can build a device at home for about $30 to see subatomic particles. It's called a cloud chamber, and muons from cosmic rays, or alpha particles from americium taken from a smoke detector, will leave trails of condensation that you can see with your own eyes. I'm writing this from the taxiway, so I can't link any videos right now. If there is interest, I can try to link some videos later. I heard this can be done with froth in the neck of a beer bottle. Some of our earliest detectors were bubble chambers, and they produced a similar phenomenon where, instead of contrails in a saturated atmosphere, you would get trails of bubbles in a pressurized liquid. I think you would be hard-pressed to demonstrate this in a beer bottle for a number of reasons, not the least of which being that the bottles are dark and aren't very big. But I do recall one of my professors mentioning that the first prototypes were built using beer. I don't have any videos of bubble chambers being used. Every run requires resetting and letting the bubbles dissipate, but you can find images created by them with a quick Google search. Story 2, you have probably heard that there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on Earth. But what I find more amazing is that there are more atoms in a single grain of sand than grains of sand on Earth. Just shows you how small they really are. I like this one more. There is an estimated 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the observable universe. Google is the name for the number 10 to the power of 100. That is 1 followed by 100 zeros. It means that there are less than Google atoms in the observable universe. Googleplex is the name of the number 10 to the power of Google, or 1 followed by Google zeros. If you try to write the Googleplex on one atom, you will run out of atoms in the observable universe. Story 3, near the center of the Milky Way, there's a dust cloud known as Sagittarius B2. This dust cloud is really, really big, almost 150 light across, and has a mass about 3 million times that of the Sun. Spectrographic analysis has shown what it's made of, and it has fairly high concentrations of both ethanol, which is what gives you the buzz when you make a cocktail, and ethyl formate, a compound which has a distinct smell of rum, and is one of the compounds that gives raspberries their taste. If you could condense it down to a level where it was detectable, then the center of the galaxy would smell not dissimilar to a raspberry daiquiri. Story 4, astronomers here. A supernova is a star that is massive enough to explode at the end of its life, and one single star that undergoes this process can briefly outshine a galaxy. If one were to occur in our own galaxy, the crazy thing is, we would know about it a few hours before the light would reach us. This is because a supernova is triggered when the core of the star collapses under its massive weight. And in the core, you get a neutron star created, and that process releases about as many neutrinos as the sun. Neutrinos are particles that don't interact much with matter, unlike light, so they escape the collapsing core instantly. The light, on the other hand, takes a few hours to work through those layers. So basically, all the neutrino detectors on Earth would suddenly go haywire from more neutrinos than we have ever seen. And that will tell everyone to run outside and try to be the first to see the first galactic supernova we've seen in centuries. You can sign up to receive the alerts, by the way. Story 5. There's a number called Graham's number, which is the upper bound to a mathematical problem. It's also a really, really big number. And by really, special notation was derived just to write the damn number. It is so unbelievably large that if you inscribed every atom in the known universe with a digit, you would effectively be 0% of the way to the number. And if you were able to conceptualize the number in your head, the information density could quite literally cause your head to collapse. And it's not even the largest mathematical number. That goes to a number called Tree 3, which is even more insanely huge. Story 6. You can't feel the temperature of things you touch. Scenario. You take a shower. Once you're done, you step on a carpet. It does not feel cold, but you step on the floor, usually ceramic. It feels cold, but both objects were in the bathroom as you showered, and so they both are at room temperature. What you feel then is the heat transfer from you to the object, one being a bad transfer because of the pockets of air in the carpet, and the other being a very good transfer with the floor. So what do you really feel? What can you really tell from touch? Story 7, I'm just reading Bill Bryson's new book, The Body, a guide for occupants, and every single page contains mind-blowing and mesmerizing facts. To wit, for each visual input, it takes a tiny but perceptible amount of time. about 200 milliseconds, one-fifth of a second, for the information to travel along the optic nerves and into the brain to be processed and interpreted. One-fifth of a second is not a trivial span of time when a rapid response is required, to step back from an oncoming car, say, or to avoid a blow to the head. To help us deal better with this fractional lag, the brain does a truly extraordinary thing. It continuously forecasts what the world will be like a fifth of a second from now, and that is what it gives us as the present. That means that we never see the world as it is at this very instant, but rather as it will be a fraction of a moment in the future. We spend our whole lives, in other words, living in a world that doesn't quite exist yet. Story 8. A potential reason for the apparent lack of nearby intelligent alien life is that it hasn't had time yet. The number of coincidences that had to occur for even a single life is unbelievable. But more importantly, the amount of time that process had to take was even more impressive. It took approximately 5 billion years for an environment to arise through evolution that rewarded intelligence rather than simply being stronger or more physically adapted. Also, about 3.8 billion years of that time was spent by waiting for bacteria to convert CO2 into oxygen. We may end up being the most ancient alien race in the local area by millions of years. Story 9. Picture 2 points on the globe, exactly opposite to each other. Or to put it another way, Antipodes. Only about 15% of points on land have a land-based, making up about 4.4% of the world's surface. So if you want to make an Earth sandwich and two people drop a piece of bread on the ground simultaneously, you're limited in options. But Antipodes also have another cool feature. There is, as an absolute minimum, at least one pair of points on the Earth's surface at any given moment that have the following properties. They're antipodal, directly opposite each other on the planet's surface. They have exactly the same temperature, down to the most infinitesimal fraction you can imagine. They have exactly the same air pressure, down to the most infinitesimal fraction you can imagine. Story 10, I remember learning about covalent bonds in high school chemistry, and the teacher talking about the atoms being friendly and wanting to share electrons so they're not alone. We'll try quarks, the fundamental particles which make up the particles which make up atoms. Due to a principle called color confinement, quarks are never found alone. They are so tightly bound to each other by the strong nuclear force that, were you to try to pull them apart, you'd have to put in so much energy to do so that when you finally ripped them apart, there would be energy present by Einstein's most famous equation that you would simply create another pair of quarks out of the vacuum. And this happens all the time, a process called hadronization. Story 11. Microwaves heat up the water inside food by blasting it with electromagnetic radiation, which resonates with the HO bond in water. It's like holding two tuning forks with the same frequency near each other. Bang one, bring it close to the other, and they will both vibrate. That's why something with water in it gets hot very fast. Something dry is very hard to heat up. Water can store a lot of heat, so it takes a long time to heat water. Something just moist can heat up real quick. The energy from the vibrating water molecules is easily transmitted to their neighbors without hydrogen bonds. Also, the microwaves can penetrate an object. Many things are transparent to microwaves, so it just goes through them and hits the water molecules inside a piece of food. Story 12. In the continuing saga of your brain is flat out lying to you. If you touch someone's nose and a toe at the same time, they'll feel it at the same time. The thing is, we know how fast nerves transmit signals, and then from your toe is obviously a lot longer than the one from yours. The lag time from touch to feel should be noticeable. Your brain doesn't register the nose touch until the signal from the foot gets to the brain. At the time I read that, they still weren't sure your brain would know. Might have been figured out by now, I don't know. Story 13, mathematician here, so we'll have some math facts. Rational rotation in 3 dimensions can be surprising in their behavior. We say a rotation is rational, or sometimes periodic, if composing it with itself. So doing one and then the entire, some finite number of times eventually leads to the identity. The composition of 2 periodic rotations of a circle is itself periodic. That's pretty straightforward. But in 3 dimensions, this breaks down badly even with very nice rotations. A 30-degree rotation composed with a rotation that is also at 30 degrees around a perpendicular axis will not be periodic. This is a nice exercise in some linear algebra if you are familiar with it. The next few things are cool, but I suspect people may already know about them. But on the off chance they don't hear, are some fun number theory things. Story 14, Franz Mesmer was a German doctor who claimed all life produces a form of energy called animal magnetism. He determined that through concentration and a wand, he could apply fields of animal magnetism to the bodies of sick people to cure various ailments. His treatments made him famous across Europe, and King Louis XVI commissioned a study of his methods. Conductors of the study included U.S. Ambassador Benjamin Franklin, yes, the $100 bill guy, and physician Joseph Ignace Guillotin. You can guess what he's famous for. The study concluded that animal magnetism was nothing more than a combination of placebo and hypnotism. Mesmer died penniless. He never made a contribution to science, but he made two contributions to language. Animal magnetism. His name is the root for the word mesmerize. Now that's a mesmerizing fact. Story 15. The void of space is not actually empty. There is a constant random and spontaneous event that generates a particle with its antiparticle, and then they get instantly annihilated by one another. There is also a cool phenomenon called Hawkins radiation. This happens when the process described before happens on the event horizon of a black hole. Since one particle is inside the event horizon, it can't touch the antiparticle, so the antiparticle flies and causes some radiation to appear. This apparently is somewhat measurable. Also, this causes black holes to lose mass, albeit an extremely small amount. Story 16, one of my materials lecturers told me a few weeks back that there's a property in certain materials that makes a flash when they are snapped. This occurs with polo mints. If you go into a really dark room, like next to no light at all, and snap the mint, it will give off a flash of light. I did it by turning the lights off, closing my curtains, and it under my blanket. Just looked through my notes, it's called Triboluminescence, and it occurs by the bonds breaking within the polo. I think it's to do with the structure of atoms. Story 17, that time moves at different rates in different parts of the universe. For instance, orbiting a huge, massive, and dense object, like a black hole. This perplexes me because surely black holes formed instantly, or not long after the Big Bang, but time would move slower around them or stop inside of them, theoretically. So if time moved slower around a black hole, then the rest of the universe is fast-forwarding. The more I think about this, the more it blows my mind. But if black holes were formed instantly after the Big Bang, and time stops inside of a black hole, and all photons are trapped inside them, then wouldn't the original Big Bang be at the center of everything that was created by the Big Bang? If the singularity that existed before the Big Bang was infinitely dense, then it too was a black hole in which it inflated or banged, which in turn could have created all of the supermassive black holes that galaxies formed around. You have the supermassive black holes at the center of galaxies that have enough density to be black holes, and you have the matter spiraling around them that did not have enough mass and density to become a black hole. Therefore, spirals inwards towards the black hole, theoretically, until it becomes a part of the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. But yeah, if the Big Bang created those supermassive black holes, then the original Big Bang could be what is inside each one of the supermassive black holes at the center of each galaxy. Story 18, cloud-to-ground lightning is actually not just a bolt of lightning striking the Earth and dissipating its energy. It's actually a combination of electrical discharges. Negatively charged electricity, which we cannot see, is generated in the sky. It hurtles downward to Earth. Since most earthbound objects carry a positive electrical charge, and opposites attract, an upward discharge of electricity is released by the object that is about to be struck by the negative streamer of electricity. When the two streams of electricity meet, they create a visible return stroke of electricity which creates a visible lightning bolt. Story 19, I think the distinction is that if I remember correctly, the law limits particles with mass moving through space specifically. However, in certain thought experiments, like your scissors blade intersection, or a supersolid pole a light year in length pushing a button, the thing traveling at FTL speed would be information, and that's actually determined by the medium in which the information is transmitted through. And when witnessed in such cases as debated neutrino experiments, these are, I believe, observed particles with no mass. Story 20, gravity is usually considered a force between two masses that pulls them together. Gravity is not instantaneous, however, and the effect of gravity is felt at the speed of light. That means it takes over 8 minutes for gravity from the sun to reach Earth. But the sun is not stationary, and so the effect of gravity is actually created by the sun's position 8 plus minutes ago. If you try to calculate the Earth's orbit using the classic view of gravity attraction, elliptical orbits due to a force between masses, the Earth would be pulled to the wrong place for a stable orbit since the sun moves. The good news is that this problem is resolved by relativity, whereby the curvature of space is affected by the velocity of the object. We are, in fact, in a stable orbit. Story 21, there's a switch in the esophagus that kind of turns on when a baby starts breathing. This is how, during autopsy, you can tell if the child had taken a full breath before death or not. Unfortunate how I know this, but my dad was a mortician who worked in a high-profile murder case where a woman went missing, 9 months pregnant, and presumably kidnapped by her boyfriend. Her 2 newborn twins were found in a garbage bag. The person, who was a friend of my dad's, did the autopsy and told him and my mom, who was a nurse, everything about what had happened. He could tell the twins had taken breaths before their murder. Very sad to know this fact the way I do, but still pretty neat. Story 22, that when objects travel close to light, they actually appear to be shorter or longer. They are not and actually longer, but my physics teacher had us do this bizarre math problem that proved true. He is running at something close to the speed of light, also known as relative speeds, and holding a pole horizontally that is longer than a barn he's approaching is wide. At the exact time between when he enters and leaves, will the pole appear to be entirely inside the barn? I may have some exact details wrong, but this math legitimately worked out. Blew my mind. Story 23. Fears can be inherited through generations. Mice were traumatized with something not normally in their environment for a few generations. Prior, they would not have had any fears of the object, but eventually a generation was born with an innate phobia of said object prior to ever seeing it. The mechanism behind this is epigenetics, genes turning on or off or being translated slower/faster. Cancer cells are immortal. Cancer cells do not age. Cells have telomeres at the ends of the DNA strands, which get shorter the more times they replicate, until eventually the DNA strands fall apart. It's not that the cells themselves are living forever, it's that all cells have a limited amount of time they can replicate. But cancer can grow forever. Some creatures don't seem to age. Fetuses and cancer cells produce an enzyme called telomerase, which repairs the telomeres. There's a cell line grown in labs called HeLa cells. They are cells from a woman named Henrietta Lacks' cervical cancer. It was the first line of cells grown in a lab that did not die shortly after being established. HeLa cells are vigorous. They were taken without informed consent in the 1920s, but have given rise to almost all major medical discoveries in the past century. If you want to see if a new drug kills cancer cells, test it on HeLa cells first, while testing regular healthy cells on the side to tell toxicity. If you want to study the cellular biology of cancer, use HeLa cells. If you need human cells to cultivate viruses for vaccine creating, development, or manufacturing, polio vaccine for example, use HeLa cells. There are other cell lines now, but HeLa cells pioneered the science of growing animal cells in a lab and are still used. Not only has the cell line saved many people, it gave rise to cell tissue culture, which is a go-to test for products before animal testing can occur. So they have also saved many animal lives. They are so vigorous in growth, they have contaminated other cell cultures in labs, and by this point have been grown into thousands of pounds of biomass. They have been spliced with animal cells, blasted into space, bombarded with radiation, genetically engineered, injected into other patients, frozen for long-term storage, etc. It has been argued, due to the genetically unstable nature of cancer cells, that HeLa cells should be classified as their own species, as some cultures of it hardly resemble human cells anymore. Story 24. You could fit 108 moons between the Earth and Moon, 108 suns between Earth and Sun, and 108 Earths within the Sun's diameter. That's all with accuracy fairly close to 100%, naturally varying because orbits are not perfect, and the Earth is not exactly spherical, as you know. Also, the diameter of the Moon is 360 by 3. Earth is 360 by 11 miles. Sun, 360 by 1200. Around 99.9% accuracy on that again, for obvious reasons. But even considering all the approximations, not that big image show, that blew my mind. Story 25. That the color of an object that doesn't emit light is every color but what you see it as. Since we see the color of an object by the light reflecting off it, it reflects the light of the color it does not absorb. Essentially, this means that a red object is physically made of every color but red, since it reflects only the red light back since it is not absorbed by the object.